At the Economic Alliance, our mission is to drive economic, workforce, and population growth strategies, and to help businesses succeed. Join the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance and learn more about our work at cedarrapids.org.
Hello, I'm Christy Fisher, president of Kirkwood Community College. We're proud to once again partner with the Iowa Ideas Conference. I hope you walk away with several new ideas and valuable partnerships. The same kind of partnerships Kirkwood has with regional employers, industry leaders, and communities, where we help build a workforce pipeline that strengthens our economy and prepares Iowans for the future. Enjoy the conference. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Welcome everybody to our session today. I am Megan Woolard. I'm the Johnson County reporter for the Gazette, and I'll be our session moderator for today. So would each of our panelists mind introducing themselves? We'll go David, Melanie, and then end with Kelly.
All right, good morning. I am David Connolly. I am the Economic Development Program Manager for the City of Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Hi, I'm Melanie Bimson, Economic Development Program Manager for Greater Iowa City.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Hayworth, the Coralville City Administrator.
Perfect. So would each of you mind talking a bit about a recent project that your municipality or organization was recently a part of?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to get started. I guess one project I'd like to highlight from the recent past in Cedar Rapids is our Iowa Reinvestment Program application. So some in the audience may be familiar with this program, but these are funds that the state of Iowa makes available to local governments. It's state share of sales tax revenue and excise tax on hotel motel. And these funds are available to local governments when there's an open application period for transformative development. So we submitted the First and First West site, and this has been a process that's a very long-term process. There's a two-stage application. So we were working on the formal application as far back as 2020. But in a lot of ways, there's a history with this site that connects to post-disaster redevelopment in the central business district of Cedar Rapids that goes back to the 2008 flood. So community visiting in the 2010s. So really, there was a lot of work in successive phases that went into that two-stage application. We received final approval in 2022. And so quick outline of the project. It's 180 housing units. There's about 128,000 square feet of retail. We were building a new municipal parking ramp, so new public parking ramp with 463 stalls, office related use. So this is the development with Pickle Palace and Big Grove, and in this particular site, which is located adjacent to the curve in I-380, there are 50,000 vehicles that pass by every day. So it's a very high profile project, has a great potential to reshape internal and external perception of Cedar Rapids.
Very cool.
One of the projects that we're working on, and we're right in the midst of it right now, is the Gather Iowa project. And that's located right at the intersection of First Avenue and Highway 6, the busiest intersection in Johnson County. And that is a project that the city has been interested in, the redevelopment of that area for probably about 15 years. And over that time period, we've had 3 different developers look at the project and try to work it through. It's faced floods 3 different times. And so it's been a real challenge for developers, and we now are moving forward with a project. The Gather Iowa project is 10 acres right at that intersection, directly west of Walgreens. And the demolition has all occurred for phase 1. and they are getting ready to start construction yet this month. And that project will end up being 243 housing units in phase one, and two retail buildings up front on Highway 6 of 7,000 square feet each, so 14,000 square foot of retail as well. Phase two will start next year, and that will include a moderate income housing project of 34 units and a new hotel as well. And so we're just really excited to have this redevelopment project happen in the middle of our community, bring new people to that area. And we're looking forward to that being done in 2027.
And I think for us, a little bit different. A really good example is a recently announced Procter & Gamble expansion, which was approved formally by the Iowa City Council on September 16th for a letter of support that went to the Iowa Economic Development Authority a few days later. The project is about approximately $150 million of an investment, bringing about 100 new jobs, all of which qualify under the High Quality Jobs Act. So we were really proud to help get it across the finish line by coordinating stakeholders, aligning applications and timelines with the city, with IEDA, and working with Kirkwood to really connect workforce programming to make this project and projects like it sustainable, which didn't happen overnight. Most of it was done. A lot of the work was done in the background, but what excites me really is the ripple effect of it, the construction, supply chain impacts, a stronger tax base, workforce development opportunities. And we're really primed for smart strategic growth. And it was really a win for deep collaboration between state, local, and private partners. And it shows what's possible when we all work together.
It's a great segue into my next question. How can, the private sector and kind of local communities work together for projects that benefit residents?
I'll share a couple thoughts about that. So I think that when looking at discussions about growth at the local level, there's a tendency to sort of look at it as an either or. Either a locality is pro-development or they're against development. And I think the reality is much more complicated than that. I think that it's a good practice for every local government to pick and choose priorities and pick and choose projects that are most aligned with their plans and their strategy and their vision for the future. So in another way, though, I think the interests of the public sector and private sector overlap in important ways. And so the private sector is looking for the ability to enter and exit a particular investment. They're looking for stability and predictability, and local government is looking for fairness and equity and accountability and outcomes. So in a lot of ways, I think there's not necessarily wealth creation or a successful outcome without having some measure of the advantages that a predictable public process provides. So, in working with the private sector to create entitlements, those development approvals, all of that is fundamental for successful execution of a development project. So I think in a lot of ways, this starts with free exchange of information and dialogue between the public and private sector. And you get to that point by realizing that in a lot of important ways, the interests of the public sector and the private sector are not as different as they might appear on the surface.
I think what David says is very accurate. And you've got to be good partners on both sides, and you got to be willing to work together, and you got to be willing to listen and find out what the priorities of both sides are. And usually if you do that, you'll find out that there's a lot of commonalities between what the private sector wants and what the public wants. And so I think you always need to take every project seriously and every idea seriously. And when you do that, you'll find a grain of something really good and important for both sides.
And I'll just say, David and Kelly both said it. It's really that trust, and it's cities can bring tools like policy, infrastructure. Companies can bring capital and innovation, and when you put those together, and you're all going for the same thing as a project together, a collaborative approach, I think really great things can happen.
Mm-hmm. Something that comes up a lot in these private-public sector sort of development conversations is, the use of different tax incentives or other sort of unique funding sources. Can you guys talk a bit about what that process looks like, and if there's a recent project that comes to mind that you'd be willing to share about that use some sort of tax incentive?
Sure. So in Cedar Rapids, we have standard terms and conditions for our city economic development incentives. So we use tax exemptions. We also use tax increment finance, like many communities in Iowa. So our standard term for a tax exemption is a 10-year sliding scale. And our standard terms for TIF are a 50-year, a 50% 10-year rebate. So we have slightly different terms for housing and non-housing projects, and projects in Cedar Rapids would qualify in a number of ways. But mainly the connection is back to the public interest and to a public benefit. So for instance, if there's an expansion at an existing business in Cedar Rapids and they're receiving state economic development incentives, we do provide local match. So we're looking for that project to be creating at least 10 high quality jobs. But if they meet that threshold, then they would qualify for city incentives. We also provide incentives to projects in our target industries, or if it's an expansion of corporate headquarters, if there's a broadly articulatable public benefit, connections back to sustainability are something that we look at. So lots of different ways, but I think the main idea is that we're providing incentives to housing or non-housing projects when there is a tangible benefit to the public.
Yeah, I think David did a good job of what our local incentives, those are the ones that we typically use as well. On a state level, there's also workforce housing tax credits and brownfields tax credits, and those are programs that we also work really hard with our local development partners for them to access, and most of those all require some type of local match, and we will do that as well.
And I think as an economic development partner, I don't have access to offering tax incentives, but what we can do is help kind of align those and make sure everyone is aware of what's available and ways we could help advocate for their project moving forward.
Perfect. I also will just make a little disclaimer. Anybody in the audience, if you have a question you'd like to ask our panelists, feel free to type it in the chat. Should have mentioned that at the beginning, but here we go. Can we talk a bit more about kind of land use and what's sort of the process for identifying land that's maybe underutilized in a development project, and that also kind of keeps in line with, a city's comprehensive plan?
Sure. So it's an interesting question. I think there's a couple ways to be thinking about this. So from sort of a strictly local government planning perspective, local government comprehensive plan, we have a variety of technical processes that feed into that. So we're continually monitoring implementation of our comprehensive plan and updating it on a 5 to 10 year study, or on a 5 to 10 year cycle. We have done growth studies in the past where we have been looking at the fiscal impact. So what is the cost of growth in both within the incorporated limits of Cedar Rapids and beyond the limits in our growth areas as defined by our future land use maps. So we're looking at both geographic area in that context, and we're looking at use. And so we're looking at which types of uses: office, hospitality, industrial, residential, whether that's very low density residential or extremely high density residential. What are the costs of growth in specific areas around Cedar Rapids? And so we're trying to gather data and ensure that our policies, our decision making, our strategy is guided by best available data possible. So we're constantly assessing what would be advantageous growth strategies that help us to implement the vision set forward in the comprehensive plan. But I think the other side of an answer to this question is sort of a very practical answer that we're, by being the second largest job center in Iowa, by being the second largest city in Iowa, we're approached by companies, by investors, by private individuals that have ideas, plans, concepts that they're interested in talking to the city about. And also, Cedar Rapids is a large landowner. We still own 140 sites due to the 2008 flood. Now, many of those sites, they're primarily very small, many of them former residential lots in our core district. But we also own property. As the city of Cedar Rapids, we have gone through public dispositions for those for those projects in the past. And First West, which I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion, was made available to a private developer pursuant to a public disposition. So I think a lot of different on-ramps to the discussion about where and when as related to growth.
We've spent as much or more time working on redevelopment of areas in our community as we have on the outlying areas. And as David said, you look at the cost of that and it's more economical, and people want to be in the center of the community. And so as part of our community plan, we identified specifically some areas of Coralville that we would look at and target for redevelopment. The Gather Iowa project is an example of that. That was in our Southeast Commercial District. It was identified in our community plan, and we'd get that information out there and make sure that developers know that those are areas of interest for us to look at for redevelopment opportunities. And so we've had great luck with that. The Iowa River Landing is one example of that, that the council identified that as an important area for redevelopment for our community. Took us a long, long time. It took us over 20 years to get that development underway, but now we're starting to see the successes of that. And you talked earlier about public and private partnerships, and I'll leave it to Melanie to talk a little bit about the strategic districts that Greater IC is working on, but that's another example of a way that the private sector and the government is working together to see some of these redevelopments occur.
Yeah, and I think it's really taking stock of some of the parcels that like surface parking lots, empty lots, where we can then layer in the practical pieces like the zoning, infrastructure, environmental constraints that tells us really things that aren't just available, but things that are actually feasible. So when Kelly was talking about the strategic investment districts, those are areas that we have identified as places where maybe catalyst projects can be done. They were identified in collaboration with our partners, our executive board, our innovation councils. We have an economic development innovation council, business support innovation council, community development council. And those areas are places that we try to align with the comprehensive plan, because every city, as you know, has a vision for where it wants density, mixed use housing, innovation spaces, things like that. So we try to align those with areas, again, that where there's opportunity to collaborate with landowners, cities, residents, and developers, so everyone can be part of the conversation of what could this look like? What could we do to really spur growth in this area?
What are the types of maybe concerns or hopes that you hear from stakeholders when you're going through that type of process? So it's a question specifically for you, Melanie. That's a big one.
Like, oh man, the concerns. I think, honestly, everyone is just really excited about opportunities. I don't know that we've heard concerns so much as interest in what everyone would like to see. And we've been really, really specific with making sure that we have residents who are part of those districts as part of the conversation. We've had the, city involvement where I won't say this is a city plan, but it's informed by what the city has in their plan. And also they've been able to tell us this is possible, or this isn't, or this is what we would need to do for something like that to be possible. So I think really it's just been a lot of collaboration. We've had artists involved. We've had businesses. We've had, like I said, residents. We've had architects, people that are really involved, who can come up with some really creative solutions to, whether it's housing and we need housing, what does this look like here? What could it look like? If it's opportunities for retail, what could that look like? And then we really talk about connection. What are the connecting things we could do to really get people more connected to the environment and to make it walkable and to make it a place that people really want to be? So I don't feel like we've had a lot of, I think it's been more enthusiasm and excitement for what could be.
One concern that can always come up in some of these areas, especially in redevelopment projects, is displacement of what's there currently, whether it's a resident or a business. And that's one of the areas that we've had some great partners. Actually, Melanie was involved in the Gather Iowa project and helping meet with the small businesses that were there and trying to keep them in our community, not particularly in that location, but what can we do to keep them in the community as well? We had a great developer in that project as well that worked with the residents and gave them a lot of time and gave them their deposits back early so that they could look for other locations. So there are some of those things that can happen, but if you're aware of them and try to address it up front, you can have some successes as well.
Interesting. So, how can cities kind of continue to grow the tax base and economic opportunities in a way that's, sustainable?
So I very challenging question. I mean, we live in a finite world with numerous constraints. So obviously, at a certain point, whenever we're talking about large projects, we have to balance complex interests. So obviously, local governments have a responsibility to ensure adequate, high quality public services. We want to be growing in a way where we're able to maintain and enhance the quality of public services. But we also have to understand from a long-term perspective, where does the capacity to provide public services come from? And so in many ways, in one way or another, that relates back to environmental quality and natural resources. So I think, from my perspective, a good practice for local governments when thinking about growth and sustainability is to think about having a mix of options and a mix of scales in your community so that you have a variety of forms of physical development. You have a variety of scales of industrial development. One way to be thinking about economic resiliency is to be thinking about the size of firms that are in your community and making sure that not only do you have large employers, but you've also got many small and medium-sized businesses. Having an abundance and a density of businesses helps to create economic resiliency and allows for the tax base to generate revenues sufficient that projects that relate back to sustainability and environmental quality can be pursued. So I think it's challenging. It's sort of a challenge of the times. But one of the things that we have done in Cedar Rapids is put forward a climate change mitigation plan. And so we're considering that dimension of growth at every stage in the process for projects large and small.
Another challenge that's been put in front of our local governments is the new property tax legislation and how that impacts growth and how you can take advantage of that growth to help all of the citizens in your property tax growth. So that's been a very interesting new challenge that we have to look at in relation to all these projects and the growth and how we ultimately can collect back to provide all of those services.
And I think too, when you're talking about sustainable growth, we really also have to consider workforce and housing, because you need housing for people to live in, to be able to work, to, it's a circular problem. So I think we need to really pay attention to our housing needs, whether it's entry level, workforce housing, downsizing opportunities. It's kind of across the board. We need to have those options so we don't limit economic potential.
Yeah, something that gets brought up in this economic development conversation a lot is quality of life for, in terms of housing, people that work in different places. What role does that kind of play across different types of developments?
That's huge part of now. I mean, the workforce is looking for, where's that quality of life place that meets what their interests are. Everything that we're focused on real on now is the quality of life, and it's not only for new people moving to our community, but our existing residents, and providing them what they want and why they would want to stay here. And there's just so many different ways that quality of life impacts the economic development and growth of our communities. And I think that's an essential and key part of what we're doing today.
Yeah, I think that used to be maybe a side benefit, but I think exactly like Kelly said, it's really central to it. When companies are looking at places to grow, they are looking at tax incentives, they're looking at sites, but they're also asking the questions, will my employees live here? Can they find housing they can afford, childcare they can count on a community they feel connected to? And we've seen it play out directly because employees can recruit talent. But if you can't find the right housing or childcare, they won't stay. And investments in things like parks, trails, arts, downtowns, strong schools aren't really nice to have. Those are competitive advantages at this point.
Well, I think Kelly and Melanie really said it all. I mean, quality of life is directly related to workforce, and workforce is the top issue that we hear from our existing industry in Cedar Rapids. Each year, we meet with 45 to 60 interstate commerce companies in Cedar Rapids, and we talk about opportunities and challenges and where the local economic development process can assist. And the top issue has been workforce for the past 10 years in one form or another. And so I think, it's not really possible to be thinking about workforce solutions without thinking about the competitive position of a community and how the various amenities, attractions, retail, entertainment in that community all come, and I would say the institutions in that community as well, all come together to produce a desirable a quality of life that makes that place a destination of choice to live, work, and invest.
Yeah, when it comes to a place like Cedar Rapids or Coralville, how do we, let prospective residents, current residents, employers know about the quality of life amenities that are available?
I think it's being intentional about telling the story. People outside of our area don't always know about the parks, the trails, the art scene, or even the childcare housing solutions we're working on. So if we don't highlight those, we risk being overlooked. And that means coordinating campaigns by letting our employers, the universities, real estate partners, everybody carry that message when they're recruiting talent. But our companies have to feel confident pointing to our communities as a place to build a career, but also to build a life. So we can tell the stories. Our cities can amplify it by weaving that quality of life messaging into their own channels to really help people see themselves thriving here.
One of the things that we're doing now more than ever is having more events and festivals that bring people out to expose them to these areas. And so we just recently, with our business community, Greater IC, we have a lunch every Monday, and we brought everybody out to our trail system and to one of our trailheads. And we had local businesses leaders talk about how they go on a daily basis on bike rides over the lunch hour in these areas. And so that was just an example of exposing people to a different area that they may not have seen before of our community and how you could maybe use that.
Every chance I get, I like to say that economic development is a team sport. And so at the city, we have an economic development web portal. We produce various types of marketing materials related to business attraction. We also have a very active retail attraction program. But it goes beyond any one organization. Our local economic development organization, the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, is widely engaged in marketing the city and the region. And we also fund economic development partners. So we support other organizations within Cedar Rapids that have a very specialized role within an extended network to deliver the services necessary for, best case growth and development. But at the individual level, there's no more effective marketing than word of mouth. So I think everyone in the community can play a part, a beneficial part in helping to shape external perception of that place.
Yeah, throughout this whole conversation, you all have mentioned collaboration in some way or another. What makes for successful collaboration on, an economic development project, revitalization project, or even just letting people know about, the trails in the community?
Well, it
I
might
think
sound. Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Sorry, dear. I was going to say, I think it's trust and assuming positive intent. I think we all want really wonderful things for our community. And so I think trusting your partners and knowing that you can call one another to bounce ideas off of one another and really work together as a team is essential.
So this might sound obvious, but I think it's also very necessary to recognize when collaboration and working together is going to help reach a goal, in the best fashion and over the shortest possible timeline. We had an example several years ago in Cedar Rapids where the Iowa Department of Transportation was applying for funding for the I-380 Wright Brothers interchange rebuild project. And we all recognized early on Iowa DOT, City of Cedar Rapids, HR Green, the corridor MPO. We realized that we were going to need to be working together to make sure that an economic impact assessment of that project was performed in a way that measured the true benefits of that application for it to be successful. So we found a very specialized firm that was capable of doing the type of economic modeling necessary. And then we all worked together to ensure that the final report was going to be supporting the project in the best way possible. And ultimately, that application to the federal government was successful, and we received $57 million to rebuild the interchange.
I want to go back to a point, David, that you made very early in this discussion about sometimes there's a perception that cities are either developer friendly or not developer friendly, and that maybe there's a little bit more nuance in between just the black and white of it all. Can we talk a little bit more about what encourages development? And would you mind expanding on that point about being developer friendly or not?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there's sort of an old model and a newer model of thinking about development. And I mean, when you look back at decades past about the history of growth and economic development and boosterism in communities in the United States, there were often a lot of aspirations that were placed on a single large project as being sort of the solution to all problems and ills. And really, that model doesn't necessarily deliver fully the benefits that are usually anticipated. There's always another community down the road that's larger. They've got a bigger sports stadium. They've got a bigger events arena. And so I think that from the perspective of a local government or even the perspective of a company that would like to invest in a place, everyone is looking for there to be coherent strategy behind the decisions that relate to growth and development. And so in that sense, I think communities do themselves a favor when they have a long-term vision for growth, when they've looked at their assets, what's present in the community, and they're competing from their comparative strengths. So they're not trying to be everything, and they're not trying to be better than the community down the road at their game, but rather they have real insight into what makes them a desirable place to live, a good place to invest, and their economic development priorities and strategies are based on an extension of their assets locally. So I think being sort of authentic in terms of the strengths and the advantages of that place, and trying to shape your competitive position from that as your starting point is the best course of action, both to ensure that there's high quality public services and facilities available as needed within the community, and also the strongest pitch you could be making to draw in external investment.
Can we talk a bit more about sort of the right development for communities? How do you know, kind of when you're talking about a long-term vision for a community, what does that look like? What types of developments do you want to see coming into a community? And, how can we make that happen?
Well, really, the key for us in that long-term vision and for development is our community plan. And we spend a lot of time continuously looking at the community plan and updating it when appropriate. We've had lots of different people involved in the development of that vision and process. Obviously, the council and our planning and zoning commission, but our neighborhoods and our people that live there and work there, our business leaders. We take a holistic approach to our community plan. And so that really is our vision and playbook for the future. And not to say that we haven't ever changed that. And we obviously are open to changing that vision. If someone comes with a great idea, we are flexible enough that we can change that. But that's really where we encourage people to look to see that vision of the future and whether they fit in, their idea or project fits in to that particular part of our community.
And I think our role is to really, as opportunities come up, to present those to our partners to say, is this possible? Does this work? Is this something that you would like to explore? I'm never in a position to say absolutely not. I'm in a position to say, this is, let's see. Because I think you never know when the next great idea is going to happen. And so I think for us, it's just providing a pathway to, is this possible?
I want to go back to our discussion a little bit about land development and underutilized areas. I know sometimes when this land development comes up, there'll be land that maybe is on a floodplain, or maybe there's a utility line going through it. How do you kind of balance those concerns to make the land maybe suitable for development for a developer to come in, and also to provide more spaces for the community to engage?
Sure. So a lot of sort of specific questions there, but so just in general, a function of the land use planning process is to understand the suitability of a site and the carrying capacity of the site. And so by carrying capacity of the site, I mean the density or intensity of development that could be allowed at that location without creating significant offsite effects that are probably adverse or externalizing the cost of development at that location onto the community as a whole or neighboring properties. So, I mean, oftentimes I think as a piece of real estate is zoned, there's an understanding of this is the degree to which it is development ready. So it's known whether or not there are adequate road connections, if there's water and sewer connection. So in that sense, the local development review process is informative in helping to understand, what would be needed for there to be best case growth or highest and best use, is another way of saying that, at that location. So I think it all really starts with the local comprehensive planning process as related to municipal development review to understand, what is the level of site readiness, whether we're talking about a small property that's newly annexed into a city, or whether we're talking about a very large planned industrial park. It's sort of the same set of multi-criteria review to understand how ready is this piece of property for development.
Coralville's built on a river. You brought up floodplains and some of those issues, and we're on the, right on the Iowa River with the Clear Creek connection. And so a significant portion of our heart of our community faces flood issues. And so if you're going to have development in those areas or redevelopment, you have to look at that. And that's one of the things that we've become keenly aware after the 2003 floods and then our most recent flood 1993 and then 2008 floods. And, those areas would have no development if we didn't address some of the requirements to protect those areas. And so we've spent a significant amount of time looking at where is development appropriate and where should it just turn into green space. And so we've seen a significant amount of green space projects in Coralville to help not only provide an amenity to our residents, but help address some of those flooding issues as well, and water quality issues. And then those areas that we decided that were important to protect, we spent a significant amount of time developing a flood protection plan and have implemented that and continue to monitor that to today. And so we still have some flood projects that we're going back and retrofitting. The Gather Iowa project is in a floodplain area, and we're working with them on addressing all of those particular requirements so that we don't have problems 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
All right, I have a question from our audience here. Have you ever received a proposal where your first response is, that won't work in this region? Or do you always try and find a way to see what's possible in an exploration phase?
I get a lot of those RFPs that come to me through IEDA or a couple of other places. And I go back to, I don't ever think it's my place to say, no. I think it's my opportunity and goal to reach out to my partners and say, is this possible? And what can we do for this? Or is this something that fits into your plan? And really look at their plans and see where we could find a fit, because we want people in our region, and we want fun projects, and we want good projects, and we want, you never know, like I said, where the next big idea is. And so I think my goal and my opportunity is, hey, where could we fit this in? Is this something that works with our partners throughout this region?
Yeah, I think Melanie had addressed it well. I mean, yes, we've received proposals that won't fit in the particular area that they may have looked at or identified, but there may be suggestions of other locations. Maybe think about this. If this would work, you might have a project that will come into and work in our region. So not necessarily that it always works in the first spot that somebody wants or their ideal spot, but usually there's somewhere else in the community or the region that it may work.
In Cedar Rapids, we try to be business friendly and open to business to the maximum degree possible. So in the case of an application that's challenging given local land development regulations, our role as staff would just be as a facilitator to help move that proposal forward in the process of municipal review. And ultimately, it's the city's development committees or elected officials that are going to weigh in with the final decision. But what we can be doing, and we do it for every project, is make sure that the applicants have best available information about city codes and requirements and don't have any unanswered questions. So we're just really there to assist.
Would each of you mind talking a bit more about kind of the role that workforce plays in economic development and growth, and how each of you engage with the workforce in terms of attraction and retention in your role?
Yeah. I work with a lot of our businesses on business retention and expansion surveys. And so I get the privilege of going in and talking with people about what are the workforce challenges you're having, what challenges are your workforce experiencing? Is it affordability? Is it with housing? Is it childcare? Is it something else that we don't even know about that hasn't even popped up onto the radar for us? But also, I get to ask them, what are the skill sets you are recruiting for? What are you having challenges finding? And if you have no challenges, what are you doing? So I think I get to see some of that through an HR lens sometimes and through a company ownership lens. And then we get the opportunity to say, hey, here's what we're noticing as kind of an overarching theme of this is a skill set that is maybe not lacking, but maybe underrepresented, something we could work on. And then we get to work with partners like ACT and the work ready communities that they're starting to roll out and offer some of those certifications that employers could look at and feel really confident with the workforce that they're attracting.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about earlier was the quality of life, and those are some of the things that we get involved in directly to make sure that the workforce that our businesses are trying to attract want to live here, and that this is a place they want to live and stay. The housing is a big part of that now, and we see more and more questions about affordability of housing, a variety of housing types. And so that's one of the things that we're constantly looking at as we're putting together our plans is how that we can address those housing issues and provide more opportunities of a wide variety of types.
So there's been and workforce is a huge topic. I mean, we could spend an entire hour talking about workforce alone, many dimensions to it, and lots of complexity and various levels to the system. But there's been a long running topic in local economic development circles in Cedar Rapids as related to food employment, food and bioemployment. So this is a discussion that goes back to the 2000s. And what we have is a workforce-oriented industry cluster initiative through the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Iowa State University. So we have an individual who is a dual employee. Iowa State, City of Cedar Rapids helps fund that position. And this individual, their specific focus is to help build connections and linkages between the human capital, the talent in Iowa State University in the form of students and recent graduates, and Cedar Rapids employers. And so there's a very specific scholarship program that is a result of a gift that was made to Iowa State University. And so the Dole's All Scholarship helps to cover 50% of the cost of tuition for City of Cedar Rapids residents at the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Iowa State. And then through this program, there are various support services and programs available that then connect that talent stream back to employment opportunities in Cedar Rapids. And so this whole topic of workforce is very dense. It's a dense topic. It's a complicated topic, but that's just one example of how we have a long-standing need that's been identified through our local economic development process over the years, and a program has grown up to address that need.
So you've each touched on this a little bit, but I'll ask it more directly. When it comes to a holistic approach to economic growth and development, what does that mean to each of you? And kind of how can we make sure that we're thinking about growth holistically?
Everyone's jumping in. I think I work with Katie Gerlach, who is our vice president of programs and also the executive director of Better Together, which is an all-in vision. And we really have these 5 pillars that include, the environment. It includes community development. It includes, a resilient economy and connected transit. It's kind of all, and I think that to me is the all-inclusive, that we're not just looking at one piece as a standalone. It's how is every part of this connected, and how can we make those connections better, and how can we work together to make some of those connections where my skill set really complements some of my partner skill sets, and then they can do the same for me. So I think it's all about how everything's interconnected. Nothing is a standalone project, really. When Kelly or David talk about our workforce and them looking for amenities and quality of life, that is connected directly to, nothing is alone on its own. It's all a part of the whole picture. And when we can look at the entire picture and not just one single piece, I think we have better outcomes and better ideas and better programs all around.
A few years ago, when we talked about economic development, it was simply what jobs have you brought to the community? What state commerce, new business have you brought recently? And that was what it was all involved about, is counting job numbers and new businesses. And today it's much more involved, as we've talked about today. There's so much more involved. The whole community is involved. The housing, the quality of life, the education. I mean, there are so many different pieces that we have to address and worry about today to be successful. And it's a bigger job today than it was 20 years ago.
So I think, to me, a simple definition of holistic thinking that makes sense is that you're considering the past, the present, and the future as you make decisions. And so a lot of that is reducing to the fact that you're not trying to maximize benefits for one accounting period in the present at the expense of the future, or the decisions or the courses of action that you're taking don't run contrary to the elements that are already present in the community. So you're trying to consider all interests and do big picture thinking by considering all timeframes when you make decisions. So being very intentional in how you approach those sorts of material decisions that will shape the impact of the future of a place. And if you do this well over time and you do it repeatedly, then the future in any community will be much better than present conditions.
I've asked quite a bit of questions about development, but I wanted to kind of shift towards supporting, our business community that already is within our community. Kind of how can we do that? What does that look like? I'll open the floor from there.
Well, I think part of it is just listening to what their needs and concerns are, and what do we need to do to keep them here in our community. Melanie, in our particular case, is a key to that, because she goes directly into their businesses and talks to our leaders and finds out what their concerns are. Civco was an example of that. They was a recent project in our community. They had a facility here of their engineering and development and sales, and they had their manufacturing in another location. And they said, to be successful, we have to be in one spot. And we worked really hard finding them a location that would work for them and that would address their particular needs to keep them in our region at this time. And so those things happen, but it's really by listening to the needs and concerns that they have.
I think too, it's also realizing sometimes it's not the big, that's a big need that they had, but sometimes it's even the small things that are little irritations for them that maybe they feel is so minor they don't want to bring it up to anyone at the city, or they don't want to, they just don't want to make waves. And it's something that we could very easily address. So a recent example that I have that might sound silly is we had a company that was really struggling with a stoplight. And it was a little bit of an irritation, but nothing that they would have ever raised to the level. And I was able to work with some of our city partners and just say, hey, is there anything you can do? And I can't promise anything. They can't promise promise anything, but they were able to, in that case, really go in and correct the problem within a week. So I think that, sometimes it's the little things that start to add up. And so if there's a way that we can step into even the little things before it becomes a big problem, I think that's a really great opportunity for us to, maintain those relationships and say, hey, we care about everything, the big and the small.
So I guess I would add that business retention is the cornerstone of our existing industry program as well. But beyond that, we also place a lot of emphasis in having an extended network of service providers for large companies, small and medium-sized enterprise in Cedar Rapids. So the city operates a 2-year competitive RFP for local economic development partners. And we put forward a wide range of services that we would potentially be willing to fund. And then we accept and review applications for that. So we work with organizations like Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, EDC and Nuboco Entrepreneurship, Kirkwood Small Business Development Center, Four Oaks and their workforce programs, and also Nubo City Market. So we're working with a lot of the organizations that are delivering services directly. And so for us, I think it's just a question of having multiple channels of communication to the business community and understanding what those needs are and responding to those needs. I think back to an example a long time ago at this point, but in 2016, we had some moderate flooding in Cedar Rapids, and we put together a small local grant program. Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance was the fiscal agent for that program, and we were able to provide local assistance to sort of speed up the recovery process for impacted businesses. And those sorts of agile initiatives aren't possible if you aren't already in active open communication with the business community.
We have an audience question here I want to make sure to ask. If you're with another region to land a big project, what is your strategy to try and win the project, and also highlighting, what your region offers?
Well, I'll have a crack at that one. So there's no one single strategy. All large interstate site searches are different. They're highly competitive. There could be 20 states in the initial stages of a large business attraction project. So, I think really it's sort of 2 parts. One is understanding, why is that project a benefit to your community? Why would it enhance, and how would it enhance your local tax base? What are the desired benefits that you feel make it worthwhile the cost to pursue this project? So doing some basic cost benefit analysis yourself before you make the decision to pursue a project, and ensuring that this project fits with your overall economic development strategy. So are you being targeted in your recruitment efforts and not simply chasing every lead that comes your way? And then secondarily, I think, something I said in response maybe to a number of questions is understanding your asset base and competing from your assets. So you may, in fact, not be able to do, and very few places are for a given project able to offer everything. So you want to accentuate those things that help to differentiate you, that set you apart in terms of your competitiveness, and would potentially give you the highest probability of advancing to that next stage in a business attraction process or a site search. One thing I would say about site searches as kind of a last thought on all of this is that they can be very long term. And so it's oftentimes something that, unfolds over more than 1 or 2 years. You can be in sort of that pre-development phase for a very long time. So it's not sort of a one size fits all, but it's rather, I think, a question of competing from your best strengths.
Just at about time here, I did want to offer our panelists, if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share, now would be the time to do so. Well, thank you all for participating, and thank you to the audience for tuning in, and thank you to anybody that's watching this after the conference. I think this has been a great conversation. So thank you all for being active participants.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.